Imagine marrying a blind noble, thinking you'll have a quiet life, and then selling him for 200 silver coins.
Crazy, right?
Well, this story isn't just crazy, it's absolute chaos. Stick around, because you won't believe what happens next. After finding out that the blind husband I had tricked into marrying me was actually the heir of a marquis' household, I didn't hesitate for a second. I sold him off to Miss Feng, the eldest daughter of the Feng family, who had come looking for him. Clutching 200 taels of silver, I stood outside the house and heard Miss Feng crying inside. Brother Sun, for the past 2 years, it has always been me taking care of you. If you don't want to return to the capital, I'm willing to stay here with you for the rest of my life. Knowing that dead blind man's usual temper, he should have been kissing the young lady senseless by now. I hugged the silver and sprinted to the butcher's house, borrowed a scale, and hurried to weigh it. I widened my eyes at the result. Damn it. It was short-weighted. Someone who handed me the silver must have pocketed part of it. I just didn't know whether it was that old nanny with tiny eyes and a big face, or that little maid with a small face and huge eyes. Forget it. Forget it. Running away was more important. After getting my household registration papers from the village chief, I sat on the ground and bawled my eyes out. 2 whole years since I transmigrated here, and finally, I was no longer an undocumented drifter. 01. When I first crossed over, I was beyond excited. Looking at my setup, I felt like I was practically the chosen heroine. Beautiful face, big chest, a father who didn't care, a mother who didn't love me, and an overbearing little brother. I grew up half-starved, half-fed. After finally getting into college, I still had to work part-time, every day. While doing a part-time job as an event hostess, I got forced to drink by a pig-faced rich businessman. I ran out, fell into a river, and just like that, I transmigrated. Based on all the novels I'd stayed up until 3 in the morning reading, I was sure that after transmigrating I would become the center of attention. But reality was cruel. On the very first day after arriving, I got caught. I couldn't understand the language and had no household registration. The village chief labeled me a vagrant. Vagrants only had 2 choices. Either find a family willing to take you in, work for them for 2 years, and then obtain legal registration, or be sent to the authorities and conscripted for hard labor. Of course, I chose the first option. The village chief took me around, banging a gong and going door to door trying to give me away. When I saw Zhang San with his mouth full of yellow teeth, Li Si missing an arm and a leg, and Wang Wu picking his nose and then scratching his feet, I fell silent. The village chief said helplessly, "What decent family would take in a troublemaker like you?" Fortunately, the village chief's wife was kind-hearted and mentioned that there was a blind man living in the village who might need someone to look after him. So, dejected, I followed the village chief to meet that blind man. At the time, Lu Xun was wearing a set of blue robes, sitting in the courtyard carving a wooden sculpture. Hearing the noise, he turned toward the gate. His handsome face was cold and expressionless. His calm eyes held not a trace of light. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. I rushed straight at him and said with deep emotion, "Husband, I'm your long-lost, dearly beloved wife." 02. In short, through shameless pestering, playing cute, acting pitiful, and refusing to leave, I managed to stay by Lu Xun's side. Never mind the countless pieces of clothing I ruined washing for him or the 6 or 7 times I burned down his kitchen. Overall, I took pretty good care of him. It was just that at some point, while taking care of him day after day, I somehow ended up dragging him into bed. That really wasn't my fault. The only thing to blame was that ancient times were just too boring. Open your eyes, eat. Close your eyes, sleep. The biggest form of entertainment was playing 1, 2, 3, freeze with the village brats. Speaking of that incident in bed, I swear it was absolutely Lu Xun who had that idea first. That day, after waking up from an afternoon nap, I stuffed a pocket full of candy as usual and went out to play with the kids. But I noticed my little follower Lu Xiaohua hadn't shown up. Report to the boss. Lu Xiaohua is getting beaten at home. Her dad is really fierce, boss, you better not go. Yeah, Yeah, he lost money gambling in town. Whenever that happens, he comes home and beats people. I got furious on the spot. Daring to hit my follower? Does he have a death wish? I gathered my little band of shrimp soldiers and crab generals and stormed over to Lu Lizi's house. The moment I arrived, I saw Lu Lizi holding a vine whip, lashing Lu Xiaohua until she was covered in blood. Her mother kept her head down doing laundry, her hair hanging over her face, hiding her expression. Lu Xiaohua clenched her teeth without making a sound, her frail body trembling and about to collapse. After thinking for a moment, I walked over and tugged my collar down off my shoulder. Then, smiling sweetly and speaking in a soft, flirtatious voice, I said, "Oh my, so you must be Big Brother Lu. You really are handsome." Lu Lizi stared at me so hard his eyeballs nearly popped out. Suddenly enlightened, he said, "No wonder you've been so good to my Xiaohua. Turns out you've been secretly in love with me." He immediately reached out his filthy hand and touched me. I swung my fist and punched him hard, so hard I nearly sent him to meet his ancestors. Left hook, right hook, punch, punch, punch. All those self-defense lessons against perverts hadn't been for nothing. After beating him up, I covered my face and cried, "Boo-hoo, I can't face anyone now." Lu Lizi bullied me. My little followers ran home and told their parents. Yeah, he touched Big Sister's shoulder. Boo-hoo, I saw him tearing Big Sister's clothes. He dragged Big Sister into the house. So vicious. They were only 5 or 6 years old. They didn't know how to lie, but they sure knew how to talk nonsense. Adults were already nosy to begin with. With just a little guidance, the kids exaggerated everything even more. By the time the story reached Lu Xun's ears, the entire village was saying I had been assaulted by Lu Lizi. So, naturally, no one bothered to pursue the fact that I had beaten him half to death. Lu Xiaohua later quietly brought me a plate of fried pastries. She said softly, "My dad can't get out of bed after you beat him. Mom, and I won't be hit for a long time." "Sister, thank you." I patted her head and didn't say anything. Because in truth, I couldn't really change anything. What could I do? Teach Xiaohua to kill her own father? Without Lu Lizi, their family land would be taken away, and the mother and daughter would have nowhere to rely on. Or should I teach her to stand up and fight back? She could barely get enough to eat as it was. Life was already hard enough. Growing up safely and marrying peacefully, that was enough for her. Yes, enough. When I was about to go all out on Lu Lizi, the woman who had been silently washing clothes stopped me, tears streaming down her face. "Miss Li, that's enough." I lay on Lu Xun's rocking chair, munching on a pear, swinging my feet and humming a tune. He walked calmly toward me. This man was truly a pleasure to look at. Just seeing him every day made my temper mellow out. Before he went blind, he must have been a pampered son of heaven, admired by everyone. No idea how he ended up stranded in this little village. Afraid he might fall, I helped him over and let him sit down. Lu Xun's hand brushed against my arm. His breathing paused slightly as he frowned and asked, "What are you wearing?" I looked down, just shorts and a tank top. But since he couldn't see anyway, I made something up. Just normal clothes, of course. Lu Xun gave a cold laugh and lightly ran his hand over my arm and shoulder. His hands were always a little cool. When they brushed over me like feathers, ripples stirred in my heart. Then Lu Xun slapped my shoulder hard and said angrily, "Liu, you should take better care of yourself. Why ruin your reputation over a scoundrel? If you wanted him gone, you could have come to me." Smiling, I asked him, "My lord, who exactly am I to you? Why should I come to you?" Lu Xun seemed to sigh. He lowered his eyes, and I could no longer see any trace of expression in those lifeless pupils. He took my hand, hesitated for a moment, then said, "I cannot see, so I don't know what you look like. And you spend all day talking nonsense. There's not a single word I can trust. I've always been stubborn and old-fashioned. I don't want to do anything with you when nothing is certain." I wrapped my arms around his neck, leaned in, and gave him a quick peck on the lips. "And do what with me, my lord?" Lu Xun's hands tightened around my waist. In a low, heavy voice, he said, "We get married. 03. Of course, I didn't marry him. What? Did I look stupid? Marrying a man with a completely unknown background. But that didn't stop me from taking every advantage I could. After I had thoroughly enjoyed Lu Xun, his official fiancé showed up at the door. Only then did I find out that he was actually the heir of the Dingyuan Marquis household in the capital. 3 years ago, Lu Xun had suddenly gone blind. Without telling anyone, he ran off to this small mountain village to live in seclusion. Everyone had been searching for him for ages. Not long ago, Lu Xun wrote a letter back to the capital saying he wanted to get married. That was how his family finally found his whereabouts. And just like that, his fiancée came rushing over to deal with me. The other woman. I crossed my arms and waited for her to speak. Feng Suyin was delicate and gentle-looking, the kind of beauty that made people instinctively want to protect her. I told myself that if things turned physical later, I absolutely couldn't go easy on her just because she was pretty. I expected her to lash out and curse me, but she didn't. She only smiled at me. All the hostility I'd been ready to unleash instantly dissolved. I said bluntly, "Give me the money, and I'll leave right away." Feng Suyin twisted her handkerchief and asked curiously, "But Brother Sun treats you so well. Wouldn't you feel sad to leave him? Not having money and freedom. That's what's truly sad." From what she said, the Dingyuan Marquis household was a prestigious, noble family, full of endless rules and rigid propriety. If I followed Lu Xun back, who knew how many hidden daggers would be waiting to stab me to death? I only had one life. No man was worth more than that. Walking into a pit of fire and blades? No thanks. Feng Suyin turned out to be a straightforward person. She quickly ordered her servants to hand me the silver. Then I told her everything, every last detail, about what had happened between Lu Xun and me. Feng Suyin listened until her face turned bright red. She muttered to herself, "Brother Sun has always been a neat freak. I can't believe he tolerated you using his teacup. He's extremely picky with food. The chefs in the manor are hired from all over the country, yet you fed him those sloppy homemade meals every day. And he would never be so shameless and reckless." She looked like her entire world had collapsed, like an idle fan watching her favorite star get exposed. I looked at her curiously and asked, "Lu Xun has already done all sorts of things with me. You still want to marry him?" Feng Suyin replied matter-of-factly, "Ever since I was sensible, I've known I was going to marry Brother Sun. In the future, I'll be the lady of the Lu household, managing the inner affairs and running the family. I'll also have to arrange 2 concubines for him to better take care of his needs." I gave Feng Suyin a big thumbs up, then turned toward Lu Xun's room and gave him the middle finger. All right, such boundless love. Clearly I was the narrow-minded one here. Feng Suyin added regretfully, "If Brother Sun hadn't insisted on marrying you as his wife, I wouldn't have driven you away. With your looks, becoming his concubine would have been perfectly fine." I clasped my hands in a mock salute. Farewell. At first, I worried that Feng Suyin's voice sounded different from mine and that Lu Xun might get suspicious. But her old nanny turned out to be quite something. She gave Feng Suyin some kind of medicinal pill to hold in her mouth. When she spoke again, her voice sounded 70 to 80% like mine. Feng Suyin played around like a curious child, saying a few sentences and then giggling at herself. Seeing her adorable appearance, I couldn't help thinking sourly, "Damn Lu Xun, what lucky fate he had." At the village chief's house, I put on a pitiful act and claimed that Lu Xun's fiancé had beaten me and driven me away. The chief's wife took pity on me and quickly helped get my household registration sorted. I grabbed my silver and my new documents and fled overnight. When passing by Lu Xiaohua's house, I stopped to say goodbye. To my surprise, the moment her mother heard I was leaving, she shoved Lu Xiaohua into my arms. With a determined expression, she said, "Miss Li, please take her with you. This girl can work, endure hunger, and won't be a burden." Lu Xiaohua clutched her tiny, worn-out bundle, crying her heart out. Inside the house, Lu Lizi was yelling, "You useless woman! Bring me wine right now. or I'll beat you to death." Seeing the lifeless despair on Xiaohua's mother's face, I scratched my head and said, "Well, why don't you come with me too?" I pulled out my household registration papers and showed them to her. The village chief's wife secretly got me registered as a man. How about you come with me and pretend to be my wife?" The chief's wife had gone behind her husband's back to help me get a male household registration. Her brother worked at the county office, so it was easy for her to handle. She had told me, "With your looks, if you go out wandering alone, men will tear you apart and fight over you. If you're willing, I'll get you registered as a man. It'll keep you safer out there." Back then, I had dropped to my knees in front of her. "Auntie, you're practically my real mother." 04. It wasn't until we left the village that I realized how harsh the world could be. Xiaohua and Xianyang had never left the village in their lives, so they followed my every command. I was completely in the dark, not knowing north from south. Back then, traveling long distances in ancient times meant relying solely on your own two legs. Of course, misfortune struck. We ran into bandits. If it weren't for Lu Xun passing by with his attendants, the three of us would have been buried under 2 meters of grass by now. I thought it through and figured that under the sun of heaven, security and living standards must be higher. So, I asked Lu Xun to take us along to the capital. In the blink of an eye, we had been living in the capital for 2 years. I would drink with Lu Xun. Once he got drunk, he'd put his arm around my shoulder, eyes red, and say, "If you hadn't helped me run the bookstore these past 2 years, I'd have been a complete useless man my whole life." Lu Xun had an older brother in the civil service and a second brother in the military, which made him seem especially worthless. In a fit of frustration, he had run away from home with his attendants, determined to make something of himself. And I, riding on his influence, had established myself in the capital and opened a bookstore. Our bookstore sold books that appealed to both commoners and scholars. Not only did the regular folks love them, but even officials couldn't get enough. The most popular titles were Journey to the West and Dream of the Red Chamber. The biggest moneymakers were Princess Returning Pearl, Legend of the Condor Heroes, and The Return of the Condor Heroes. Of course, the authors' names remained credited properly. And every time we made some money, I would donate part of it to the local charity in the authors' names. With money in hand, life became much more comfortable. I rented a small courtyard, and the three of us lived there together. Business wasn't easy, and social obligations kept us busy, but it was still promising. Xianyang opened a pastry shop, and Xiaohua went to school. My most miserable task every day was memorizing texts. The most painful thing was turning down all the amorous advances that came my way. Who knew the aristocratic circles in the capital were so intense? Many noble women secretly had their maids send me flirtatious messages. Once, at a banquet, I got drunk and nearly ended up stripped bare. I was terrified. After that, every time I went out, I felt like I needed to lock my pants. To prevent my identity from being exposed, I even faked a tie-on patch on my trousers. After 3 rounds of drinking, we were both a little tipsy. Lu Xun slammed the table, hair standing on end, and shouted, "Let's go. Now that I have some clout, I'm going home to ruin my brother's wedding." I knew he had a crush on someone, of course. But since it was his soon-to-be sister-in-law, he could only pine silently. Well, alcohol gives courage. After 3 jars of wine, we dared to go after the wife of the Almighty himself. Arm in arm, we went straight to his family home. I boasted shamelessly, "This face of mine is irresistible to both men and women. Worst comes to worst, I'll just flirt with your brother." Lu Xun cried, "Good brother, good brother." Brimming with confidence, we stormed into the Lu family. As luck would have it, there was a family banquet tonight, and everyone was there. A dozen pairs of eyes immediately fixed on us. Lu Xun shouted, "Brother?" His older brother's voice rang out. "What did you say?" I raised my voice and yelled, "He's in love with you." Lu Xun shivered all over and clamped my mouth, screaming, "I like men." Damn it. That scream sobered me up almost instantly. But I had drunk too much, so my mind was foggy and my vision blurry. I shook my head and squinted at Lu Shaoting's older brother. Why did he look so much like Lu Xun? He wore a dark brocade robe with golden patterns, and his eyes no longer looked lifeless. He sat in the seat of the family head, exuding an aura that could suppress everything. Lu Xun's gaze landed on me from afar. He asked, "And you?" I blurted out, "Of course I like men too." Lu Xun nodded and said coldly, "Good. Take them away and sober them up properly." 05. Lu Shaoting turned out to be the third son of the Dingyuan Marquis, Lu Xun's own younger brother, and the girl he had a crush on was Feng Suyin. I was stunned. Lu Shaoting and I had just been mercilessly doused with 2 buckets of cold water, completely sober now. That was when I learned Lu Xun had returned to the capital. The Dingyuan Marquis' household had hired a miracle doctor to treat his eyes. Now, he could see faint shapes, though his eyes still needed to be covered with a silk ribbon during treatment. Lu Shaoting looked pale and grabbed my hand, saying, "Compared to being in love with my brother's fiancé, liking a man is nothing. Brother, you've got to cover for me. Otherwise, without my brother lifting a finger, my mother could beat me to death herself." In a household like the Dingyuan Marquis, liking men was only a scandalous indulgence. But secretly pining for the elder brother's fiancé? That was a crime against human decency. Not only would Lu Shaoting get beaten half to death, but Feng Suyin would also be dragged into the mess. This damned feudal morality system, it was really perverse. Had I known Lu Shaoting was Lu Xun's brother, I would have run as far as I could. But now, even running faster than the wind wouldn't save me. Thinking back to Lu Xun in the hall, aloof and noble, I couldn't help shivering. Calm yet commanding, a true noble son from a prominent family should look like that. No wonder Lu Shaoting was scared half to death. I was afraid too. Lu Xun was no longer the blind man I had once manipulated. After 2 years in the capital, I knew that for a lowly commoner like me, life was cheap in front of the wealthy. The social hierarchy was strict, not just talk. If it weren't for Lu Shaoting backing me, I wouldn't even have been able to open the bookstore. I rubbed my cold face, swallowed, and said, "Don't panic. Since you told your brother we're together, stick to it. Don't back down." Now Lu Shaoting and I were in this together. What affects one of us affects the other. He sighed. My elder brother has lived alone for 2 years, and Sister Suyin has secretly cared for him all that time. Honestly, I never had a chance. Brotherly, I'm such a coward, aren't I? I patted his shoulder sincerely. What's so great about your brother anyway? Old-fashioned and stiff, same position in bed every time. Life with someone like that would be boring to death. If I were Miss Feng, I'd choose you. In spring we ride horses and drink. In summer we sail the lakes and pick lotus. In autumn we climb mountains and camp. In winter we tramp through snow looking for plum blossoms. What a life. In ancient times, no phones, no TV, hardly any entertainment. Life was boring enough to grow weeds. You had to amuse yourself and make your own fun. Lu Shaoting's eyes shone as he held my hand. You really understand me, brotherly? Life's too short to not enjoy yourself. But everyone calls me useless. Boo-hoo, it's so unfair. You're not wrong. The only reason you can enjoy life is because your brother is carrying all the weight. I silently cursed Lu Xun. What a piece of trash, the cold water he got us with. Now wet and chilled, with a heavy feeling in my lower belly, I had a terrible premonition. The door opened silently. Lu Xun stood calmly in the doorway, his expression blank. Lu Shaoting froze, shrinking like a quail, head down, barely daring to breathe. Lu Xun raised his hand. Lu Shaoting slinked away like a servant. And me?
Me?
I gaped, watching him disappear. I gave Lu Xun an awkward smile. Heir. I was going to look for third master. But Lu Xun didn't let me off, even though he still couldn't clearly see my face. Looking into his eyes made my whole body tense. He said calmly, Wuyu from Qingsong County came to the capital 2 years ago with your wife and daughter to settle, correct? My heart skipped a beat. He'd investigated me thoroughly. I blinked and replied ingratiatingly, all thanks to Third Master. Just trying to make a living. Lu Xun remained silent, stroking the golden patterned embroidery on his sleeve, lost in thought. The air froze, and I felt nervous. After a long pause, he suddenly asked, "What did you mean when you said, 'I'm always in the same position in bed'?" I wanted to slap myself. Talking too much had really backfired. Lu Xun was extremely rigid in bed. He had his own set of rules. Where he learned them, no one knew. Always kissing my face first, then my lips. And he never removed all his clothes while doing it. Honestly, the experience was terrible. Seeing his restrained expression, I felt like we were performing some sacred ritual. I doubted he could even recognize me. To avoid exposing my disguise as a man, I had been dieting and working out like crazy. Now my chest had shrunk, my body was firm, not soft as before. My voice had been adjusted with herbs to be more neutral. And he still couldn't see clearly. Afraid he'd probe too much, I pretended to be flirtatious. "You seem very focused on rules, heir. People like me and Third Master, with wild tempers, can really get carried away." As expected, Lu Xun didn't look pleased. He clearly didn't want to hear about his brother's bed affairs. My stomach churned. I wanted to slip out immediately. Seeing Lu Xun silent, I tried to sneak past him. But he stood there like a gatekeeper, no expression, blocking my way. I had to sidle quietly past him. He always carried a cold aura, like mountain mist mixed with a scent of grass. I sniffed involuntarily, feeling restless all over. 2 years. Life was finally stable, and now I wanted a man to relieve some boredom. Lu Xun grabbed my hand. He looked down at me and said lightly, "Your clothes are dirty. Change before you go." I lifted my hem. Blood had spread across it. Such a vivid color, he would definitely notice. My period had come early. I honestly felt like dying. Lu Xun stared at me, unmoving. I took a deep breath and gritted my teeth. Sigh, it's all Third Master's fault. He was too rough last night, and now I'm bleeding. 06. Things had escalated. Lu Shaoting didn't want an arranged marriage, so he told Lu Xun that he truly loved me. When Lu Xun came with his people, I was completely unprepared. Xiaonyang held Xiaohua's hand under the eaves, mother and daughter, both staring at me with anxious faces. Lu Xun wanted me to divorce. He sat on a simple wooden chair and said calmly, "Since you have feelings for Shaoting, then divorce him." Divorce my ass. I gritted my teeth and said, "I'm only playing around with Third Master. My true love is for Xiaonyang. Heir, I will never let Third Master waste his life on me. I'll end it with him right now." Lu Xun didn't respond, only picked up a cup to drink tea. I saw him fumble on the table and grab my teacup. I quickly held his wrist and swapped the cup in his hand. Lu Xun's movement paused slightly, and he lowered his head to drink. The wind lifted the ribbon over his eyes, brushing softly against my face. He said lightly, "Now Shaoting is starving himself for you, yet you only call it a game. Is this how you always treat other people's feelings, Wuyu?" Lu Shaoting clearly couldn't let go of Feng Suyin. It's all Lu Xun's fault. After being back in the capital for 2 years, he still hasn't married Feng Suyin, giving Lu Shaoting false hope. I was furious and blurted out, "I've played with hundreds of men, he's nothing. Your Dingyuan Marquis family may be prestigious, but if you really force me to divorce, I will never let you bully me." After opening my bookstore, I had courted the favor of many influential people. If it came to a showdown, I'd cut off the story's serialization. Let my readers deal with Lu Xun themselves. The cup in Lu Xun's hand snapped with a crack. The shards cut his hand, and blood flowed. I was so shocked my mind went blank. I rushed to bandage him. Lu Xun's hands had never done heavy work. Only the ones he used for writing had calluses. Back at the little courtyard, he had been injured by a carving knife, leaving some scars. I bent over to wrap the gauze, trembling as I said, "Heir, this cheap cup is no good. I hurt your noble hands. I'll throw it all away later." Lu Xun asked coldly, "You seem very afraid of me." Of course I was. Afraid he would recognize me and take revenge. My hard-won peaceful life would be ruined. I tentatively said, "If someone deceived you, what would you do?" Lu Xun smiled faintly and said slowly, "Tie them up, little by little, punish them properly." Immediately, my mind pictured being bound in a dark room, tortured by Lu Xun with all sorts of tools. He tapped the table and continued, "Li Wuyu, since you've provoked our Lu family, this cannot end here."
Divorce.
Xiaohua could no longer hold back. She ran over, clinging to me and crying, "Please, heir, spare my father. My mother, and I can't live without her." I patted Xiaohua's head, my heart aching. Every day I memorized texts until I nearly went bald, just to secure this stable life. Was it easy? Xiaonyang also came over and gently held my hand. The three of us huddled together, pitiful and helpless. I pleaded, "Heir, the child is still young. She can't live without a father." Lu Xun pondered. "Li Wuyu, if you don't want a divorce, there is one other option."
07.
Lu Xun said Lu Shaoting had respected and feared him since childhood, and if I wanted Lu Shaoting to give up on me completely, I had to cooperate and stage a little drama. I stormed into the Lu household, dragging out the trembling Lu Shaoting. He cowered in the chair, face grim. "Brotherly,
Calm down.
kill me and you won't survive either." I sneered. "Did I owe you two brothers in my past life? What stupid plan did your brother come up with?" Lu Xun wanted me to pretend to transfer my affections, fall in love with him, to make Lu Shaoting give up. When I heard this, my vision went dark. Lu Shaoting eagerly poured tea. "Brotherly, I know you've been wronged. Just play along with my brother for a few days, and I'll tell him I'm done with you. That way, you'll be free. To make up for it, I'll give you a 20% share in our business profits." I huffed and tapped the teacup. Lu Shaoting revised, 30%. "No, 40%. Aside from the bribes, from now on, you get 80% of the profits, I get 20%. I suppressed a smile, cleared my throat, and said, "Brother Lu, it's only because of our deep brotherly bond that I dare enter this den of danger. That wooden face of your brother? I don't even want to act near him." Lu Shaoting swore again and again that he would do everything to help me if I were ever in trouble. TSK. That loyalty was priceless. After leaving, I calculated how much money I could make and couldn't stop smiling. Publishing serialized books in ancient times wasn't easy. First, you had to maintain connections to avoid being banned for false accusations. Second, printing costs were extremely high. Most importantly, piracy was rampant. Pirates hired cheap labor to copy books on poor-quality paper. They made huge profits, while I suffered. Now we could earn money thanks to Lu Shaoting's connections, suppressing piracy. Otherwise, I'd have lost everything. Living in the capital wasn't easy. 2 years in, I was still renting. Xiaohua didn't have a capital residence, so she couldn't attend a proper academy. Lu Shaoting had to use connections to find a private tutor, and the yearly fees were outrageous. Fortunately, Qiaonyang's pastry shop did well enough to help cover some expenses. With Lu Shaoting giving me such generous terms, I'd likely be able to buy a house and register a capital residence in another year. I thought about it and sighed. Maintaining a household was truly not easy. Whether in modern times or ancient times, housing worries never change. I really envied people like Lu Xun.
Sigh.
Today I even had a meeting with him. I had no idea what script Lu Xun had written for me to perform. But secretly, I was excited. Originally, I just wanted a man to relieve some boredom. Lu Xun was practically delivering one to me, so I wouldn't hold back. 08. "Young master, your hand has to be on my waist." "Yes." "You have to kiss, otherwise Shaoting won't believe it." "You're so stiff. Anyone can tell we're acting." Lu Xun actually said that all we needed to do was hold hands, sit together, read, and write. I thought to myself, hold hands? Who just holds hands? If we're doing this, we might as well go all out. After all my hard work, it has to be big. When Lu Xun heard my words, his expression darkened slightly, as if this had already exceeded his understanding. Such a stickler. Back when we were together, he only kissed me in the bedroom, and only with the lights off. Outside the bedroom, He behaved like a perfectly pure virgin. I deliberately threatened him. Heir, if you don't act convincingly, Shaoting will notice. Then he'll still insist on being with me, never marry or have children, and become a laughingstock. During my days at the Lu residence, I'd picked up plenty of gossip. The Dingyuan Marquis spent most of the year in Jiangnan tending to his health, and the Marchioness didn't manage anything. In such a large household, Lu Xun had to handle everything, down to the smallest details. He was exceptionally capable, too, renowned for his intelligence since childhood and deeply favored by the emperor. If it weren't for his blindness, Lu Xun would have been practically perfect. Lu Shaoting grew up following this older brother closely, and they were extremely close. So for Lu Xun to steer his beloved younger brother back onto the right path, he had to go all out. Sure enough, Lu Xun's attitude softened. He whispered, "Then you may kiss me." I excitedly rubbed my hands together. Today, Lu Xun had no ribbon over his eyes, and his gaze seemed far more alive than before. He leaned on the soft divan, eyes lowered, lashes long. It made him seem less stern and cold than usual, giving me the illusion that I could do as I pleased. After 2 years without closeness, I was a little nervous. I placed my hand on his shoulder and slowly leaned in. Lu Xun's lips were still as cool as before. When I pressed closer, my heart pounded like thunder. I pulled back and lingered in the aftertaste. Lu Xun's eyes remained closed, seemingly surprised that it ended so quickly. He shifted slightly, adjusted his clothing, and straightened up. Lu Xun asked, "Will Shaoting believe it now? Didn't you say you two are very playful?" That sounded like he was doubting my acting skills. I hadn't dared to kiss deeply, fearing Lu Xun would dislike it. I immediately said, "Of course he won't believe it. I just didn't want you to be uncomfortable, so this was only a small test. What comes next, heir, you need to be mentally prepared for." Lu Xun slowly furrowed his brow, as if trying to convince himself. He gripped my wrist, took a deep breath, and said, "Then you may proceed." 09. I practiced with Lu Xun for 3 days. I have to admit, he was a good student. At first, he could only passively let me kiss him. Now, a few moves, and he had me gasping for air. I pushed him away, panting, my whole body stirred and flushed. "That's enough. Heir, I think we can act it out for Shaoting now." If this continued, I felt like I wouldn't be able to resist taking Lu Xun to bed. Lu Xun took half a step back, thinking, and said, "But I feel like there's still a lot you haven't taught me." My lips were already swollen from all the kissing. If we went further, I'd be nothing but bones. We went to the garden together. On the way, Lu Xun asked, "After seeing me like this, Li Wuyu, do you still find me dull and boring?" He was actually thinking about that. I complimented him enthusiastically. "Of course not. If I were a woman, I'd cling to you all day." Lu Xun replied coolly, "Really? You'd truly cling to me?" Although I've said many lies before, this one was absolutely true. Back in the village, when I thought Lu Xun was just some ordinary rich young master, I had imagined clinging to him. He was blind and a bit cold and dull in personality. But he treated me well. At first, he only took me in out of pity, teaching me to read and write. Gradually, I started thinking about winning him over. At that time, I didn't know about Feng Suyin, so I had a few genuine feelings for him. I didn't want to dwell on the past, so I changed the topic jokingly and poured him some tea. Lu Xun, however, refused to let it go. He said, 2 years ago, I stayed in a village in Qingsong County, accompanied for a long time by my fiancée under the alias Liu. Li Xiong, you say she loved me deeply. Should I marry her? I heard the words "loved me deeply," and I lowered my head, sipping tea, nodding. Of course. True love shows in times of hardship. Lu Xun said calmly, I also think I should marry her. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Lu Shaoting approaching. Hurry, just finish this. I followed the plan and wrapped my arms around Lu Xun. Originally, we had agreed on a light, fleeting kiss on the cheek, just enough for Shaoting to see. But Lu Xun suddenly applied a bit more force, pulling me into his arms. His lips landed with the weight of punishment. The sweet taste of rose pastries spread in our mouths. Ugh. Heir, enough. I tried to push him away, but he didn't move an inch. Shaoting had already come closer. He covered his ears and screamed, "Ah!" Shaoting rushed over and yanked me away, shock and pain written all over his face. Lu Xun, didn't we agree you were only acting with my brother? You too. I was stunned. What kind of act is this now? How did it all spill out at once? Shaoting clenched his fists, eyes bloodshot, and said passionately, "How can you do this to Sister Suyin?" I pinched him lightly and whispered, "Wrong words. You should say sorry to yourself." Shaoting was already going crazy. He pushed me aside, tears streaming, and said, "Brother, Sister Suyin was betrothed to you since childhood and waited for you all these years. And you actually..." I was dumbfounded. Why isn't anyone following the script? Shaoting turned to me again, murmuring, "Lu Xun, I know my brother better than anyone. He would never go this far just for acting. You don't know, ever since he was a child, he hated being touched. Once, a maid stripped and threw herself at him. He was sick for 3 whole days." Lu Xun sat calmly, in stark contrast to Shaoting's hysteria. He asked lightly, "Shaoting, are you arguing with me for Suyin, or suffering because Wuyu has turned her affections elsewhere?" Shaoting shouted, "I have nothing to do with Lu Xun. I adore Sister Suyin. I am outraged for her. You betrayed her."
I swallowed hard.
Shaoting was risking his life. Who would have expected Feng Suyin to appear at this moment? She carried a food box, pale and absent-minded, clearly having heard everything Shaoting said. It was a total mess. I raised my hand, trying to regain control, and shouted, "Shaoting, listen. I know you care deeply for me, and you said those things to provoke your brother." Shaoting glanced at Feng Suyin, wiped his tears, twisted his mouth in mockery, and didn't argue further. I shouted at Feng Suyin, "Miss Feng, it's all a misunderstanding, a complete misunderstanding." She seemed to just come back to her senses. Gracefully, she walked over and placed the food box on the table. Smiling as if nothing had happened, she said, "I've long heard of Li Gongzi's reputation. Today, seeing you in person, you truly are talented and handsome." The 4 of us sat together drinking tea, as if nothing had happened. Shaoting started laughing and sharing childhood stories. Feng Suyin smiled. "Every time you got into trouble, you came to me for help. Over the years, I can't even remember how many times I petitioned for you with Brother Lu." Shaoting made a pitiful face. "Without Sister Suyin, I'd have been beaten to death long ago." Feng Suyin poured tea for Lu Xun softly. "Brother Lu, I heard the Marquis is returning to the capital. Why don't we marry when he gets back? I'll help you so much once I'm in the family." If Lu Xun hadn't had his collar pulled earlier, he'd still be frowning. I half wondered if what just happened was all an illusion. I hadn't been kissed passionately. Shaoting hadn't confessed his love. Feng Suyin didn't know her younger brother-in-law liked her, and hadn't seen her fiancé get close with a man. They were all so skilled at maintaining appearances, masking their emotions, every expression flawless. It was as if an invisible thread pulled them back in line. I glanced at Lu Xun. His face held the familiar coldness. I was reminded of when I first met him, meticulous, calm, untouchable, distant. Now, sitting with his family, I felt on edge, shivering inside. I found an excuse. "Heir, Miss Feng," shouting, "I have some matters to attend to. I'll leave first." Yet, none of them spoke.
What?
Shaoting shouldn't have said warmly, "All right, Lu Xun, see you next time." Feng Suyin should have smiled, "Li Gongzi, take care." And Lu Xun, I looked at him. He was watching me. His gaze seemed like a black hole, ready to swallow me whole. The 3 of them just stared. I wanted to leave, but my legs felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. I remembered when I first arrived in the capital, unfamiliar with everything. Shaoting helped me rent a house, managed everything for me. He helped me when Xiao Hua was bullied at the private school. When I cried drunk late at night, he didn't question me, just drank cup after cup with me. Our friendship had grown deeply over time. And Feng Suyin, knowing about my relationship with Lu Xun, hadn't humiliated me. She didn't call me a cheap woman or a slut. I had even braced myself to fight back. But she just smiled, gave me money, and said if I ever got into trouble, I could come to her. She had apologized sincerely. Miss Lee, I'm sorry. If anything happens, you must come to me. A young girl in unfamiliar territory faces many difficulties. I will help you to the best of my ability. The seal she gave me was still hidden under my pillow. I thought back to a wish I'd made before traveling. In another life, I hoped someone could love and help me unconditionally. I wanted passionate and honest friendship. I wanted gentle, soft kindness. Thinking about it, it had all come true. I paused, then turned and sat down again. I heard all three of them exhale simultaneously. Shaoting's smile faltered, unsteady. Feng Suyin's eyes were tired, slightly teary, rims reddened. Lu Xun held my wrist firmly, gripping tightly. I clear my throat. You are all my friends. When friends are in trouble, I cannot stand idly by. I think there might have been some misunderstandings between you. Let's speak openly. How about we move somewhere else and have a drink? Sometimes, when we dive into a story, it's not just about what happens next, it's about feeling it. Imagine being caught between duty, fear, and the faintest spark of freedom. Now, take a breath, because the next part will pull us into Feng Suyin's world, her fears, her small rebellions, and the choices she never got to make. Let's see how her story unfolds. 11. Feng Suyin had drunk 2 cups and swayed dizzily into my arms. I held her gently, stroking her pale little face, feeling a pang of tenderness. She cried, I don't want to marry brother Lu Xun. I've always been so afraid of him. When Feng Suyin was 5, she was brought to the Lu family. At that time, Lu Xun was already 11, dressed in a deep blue robe, standing among a group of adults. When their marriage was mentioned, he merely glanced at Feng Suyin, calm and unreadable. That look was nothing like one cast toward a fiancé. It was chillingly indifferent. After returning home, Feng Suyin cried nonstop. Clinging to her mother's arm, she said, Mother, I'm afraid of brother Lu Xun. I don't want to marry him. The family laughed it off. Children understand nothing. When she grew up, she'd marry willingly. But yes, children understand nothing. Why force a marriage when she couldn't comprehend it? Feng Suyin had always been lively, but as she grew, her temperament became more restrained. Lu Xun is steady. When you become his wife, you must be even more virtuous. Learn these dishes. Lu Xun loves them. Remember the preferences of the Marquis, the Marchioness, everyone in the Lu household. These rules, these standards, wrapped Feng Suyin like layers of a web, erasing her own name, shaping her into Lu Feng. She complied, knowing that the Marquis' family had weakened and that marrying into the Dingyuan Marquis would secure support for her own family. But she and Lu Xun, 6 years apart, barely exchanged words. The awkwardness was always resolved by Lu Shaoting stepping in. In truth, her time with Shaoting far outnumbered her moments with Lu Xun. Sometimes, she dared a fleeting thought. Maybe marrying Shaoting wouldn't be so bad. Yet even this thought shamed her into tears. She had studied lessons for women and virtue of women. How could she harbor such brazen notions? Feng Suyin punished herself, kneeling on the floor to copy texts whenever inappropriate thoughts surfaced. When Lu Xun developed his eye disease, our engagement was postponed. At that time, I felt relieved, she sniffled. But my mother could never miss it. Confined to a dark, sunless Buddhist hall, she reflected day after day. Her mother loved her dearly, but she feared her daughter's faintest lapse could ruin her life. Ah, Een, you are a piece of my flesh and blood. That's why I must make you clear-headed. You will marry the Dingyuan Marquis, not Lu Xun. Even if you were blind or crippled, you must go through with it. Her mother held her, soothing. Women go through this. Be good, stop crying. Feng Suyin thought. Yes, this is how it's always been. Her mother had barely met her father before marriage, Yet life went on, no talk of romance, just duty, serving in the household, continuing the lineage. Women were expected to live this way. She looked at me, tilting her head slightly, both adorable and puzzled. But you didn't live like that. You followed brother Lu Xun without status, always teasing him. Eating what you liked, drinking what you liked. When I gave you money, you just left without a word. I had no parents or family ties, no chains. I lived as I pleased. I patted her head. Don't follow me. I'm a bad example. Feng Suyin could never betray her family. If she did, her parents and brothers would be shamed. Given her personality, that shame would haunt her for life, perhaps even drive her to self-punishment. She nodded obediently. All right, I'll only get drunk tonight, just this one night. Miss Lee, if you like, brother Lu Xun, when I marry into the family, you can come in. From then on, we sisters will stick together, and I won't be so lonely. If Lu Xun hadn't developed his eye condition, the original plan would have gone ahead. They would have married and had children. Feng Suyin would have lived quietly in the grand household like every other woman she knew. She would teach her own daughter how to serve her husband. Now Feng Suyin was like I once was. Without ever seeing the light, one could live entirely unaware in darkness. Before elementary school, I had grown up in a tiny village where every girl dropped out by middle school. Some went to work, some married early. Everyone's fate was similar. As a child, I didn't feel unloved or neglected. Boys were simply favored more. I got used to wearing shabby clothes, giving my best to my younger brother. I got used to being bullied by him, to appeasing him. Until I was 10, when my language teacher took me to the city for a composition contest. I saw a girl my age crying to her parents. Today is my competition. I won't attend my brother's recital. I already let him have it last time, her parents said apologetically. Her brother had come too, tugging her. Sister, recitals can always happen, but this is your only competition. I'll cheer for you too, okay? Her family cherished her. I stood aside, holding the provisions my mother packed for me, stunned. Even girls could be loved like this.
Her essay was titled about me.
She won first place. I got third. The prize I earned? I had to give it to my brother. For the first time, I felt upset. For the first time, I resisted. I don't want to give it to him. Speaking those 5 words stirred an inexplicable energy within me. I realized I was different. Older, more aware. Then, I got beaten and obediently went to wash clothes and cook. Sitting in the courtyard, eating plain noodles without a fried egg, I slowly understood. Girls had more paths than just marrying or working. They shouldn't give up themselves early, letting brothers climb over their shoulders. Later, my language teacher sponsored me to go to the city for middle school and high school until I got into university. She said, "A beautiful girl like you, if left to grow aimlessly, could easily go astray. I'm helping you, and I hope one day you can help someone else." Now, I finally had the chance and the ability to help someone. Feng Suyin had cried enough and sobered up, wiping her tears shyly. "Miss Lee, I'm sorry for making you see me like this." Outside, someone was already waiting impatiently. Lu Shaoting came knocking urgently. "Li Xiong, how is Sister Suyin? She's not strong with alcohol. Don't let her drink too much." I opened the door and said, "She says she wants to marry you. Do you dare take her?"
12.
In truth, the Feng family only cared about securing enough benefits. They didn't care whether Feng Suyin married Lu Xun or Lu Shaoting. When news spread that Lu Xun might be blind for life, the Fengs, under the guise of concern, sent several doctors to examine him. Meanwhile, news from the palace arrived that the emperor would not allow a blind man to serve as the heir of the Dingyuan Marquis. Suddenly, the Feng family, who had been rushing to push the marriage forward, changed their stance and no longer seemed so anxious. Then, word came that Feng Suyin had caught Lu Xun being intimate with another man. Furious, she returned home and cried bitterly. The matter escalated, and the emperor, who had always favored Lu Xun, issued a decree to scold him. Feng Suyin, who had previously been running to the Lu household every few days, gradually disappeared from Lu Xun's sight. The Feng sent word. The engagement had been arranged long ago. Now that Lu Xun's behavior was improper, delaying Feng Suyin's marriage for so many years, they needed an explanation. After much discussion, they finally handed the engagement over to Lu Shaoting. A legitimate son of the Feng family quietly took a post in the Ministry of Revenue, a permanent position. To Feng Suyin, the lifelong engagement that had weighed over her head was suddenly changed. A poor little pawn, obedient and pitiful. Her family's future depended on her exchanging a lifetime of happiness. I stood at the window, watching her cling to Lu Shaoting, laughing and crying, and I smiled along. I glanced at Lu Xun. He was leisurely sitting at the desk, writing, completely not blind. What a deceitful man. His eyes had long been healed. He was just waiting for me to throw myself into his trap. Originally, I thought he was pretending, so I'd pretend too. We would all pretend, I'd take advantage a little and then retreat. But I dove straight into his trap, and now, there was no escape. The angrier I got, the more I stomped over and cupped his face, biting him hard on the lips. I surrendered, pitifully saying, Lu Xun, I admit defeat. Let them be happy together. Don't cause any more trouble. Lu Xun lifted a hand to caress my face, smiling lightly. Liu, you're not admitting defeat. You simply don't think I could love you forever. You're waiting for the day I grow tired, weary, then leave as casually as I did before. He held me, resting his chin on my shoulder, sighing. You, as a person, when someone does you a favor, you want to repay tenfold. These past 2 years, I watched your friendship with Shaoting grow stronger, and I knew you would help him. 13. The first time I met Feng Suyin, I had already noticed the scars hidden under her bracelets. Those kind of marks I was familiar with. When people are hopeless, they often want the simplest way to end it all. But the hardest thing in life is letting go. As Feng Suyin said, if I die, how heartbroken would my mother be? She may be strict with me, but she also tries her best to protect and love me. But for her, for me, whom I marry is not up to us. It's decided by our fathers and brothers. She could not fully give up that love, could not abandon her life. She could only inflict pain on herself, caught between suffering and awareness. Just like I once was. I had tried so hard to rise, yet still got dragged down unexpectedly. After a long day of work, I returned to school, exhausted. I saw my father causing a scene at school, trying to force me to drop out and forbidding me from having a boyfriend. He even spread lies about me personally, that I had slept with someone in the village, that I had miscarried twice. All this, for a dowry of 180,000 taels, to force me into marriage. The school, afraid of trouble, subtly advised me to take a leave. At that moment, I felt completely crushed. Late at night, I calmly drank a few cans of beer, ran to the river, and slashed my wrists. It was then my mother called. Xiaoyu, today's your birthday. Remember to eat longevity noodles. I won't let your father bother you anymore. Don't worry, live your life well. My father, that rotten gambler, had haunted me like a shadow my entire life. I suspected I could never escape him. Then my mother called, and in a decisive act, ended it all with him. She gave my fried egg to my brother, bought him expensive sneakers, remembered all his preferences. But she was willing to trade her life, so I could live well. Who could have guessed that not long ago, she had slapped me harshly, tired and reproachful. Everyone else is willing to help their brother. Why aren't you? Love is often accompanied by pain. It entangles, drags, and tortures endlessly. I fought desperately to swim out of that stagnant pool, vowing to live a sunnier life. Now Lu Xun used Feng Suyin's freedom, Lu Shaoting's happiness, to make me stay by his side. If I were a pure, innocent girl, I would have cried, rebelled, and cursed his tyranny. A chase, a tortuous love story. But I grew up in this twisted, tangled form of love, so I accepted it calmly. I suppose when faced with love, I approach cautiously. But when I encounter thorns, I turn and flee without hesitation. Lu Xun, in holding me this way, perhaps saw me as unreliable too. Both of us, in truth, fear straightforward love. Yet in this kind of entanglement, tinged with control and coercion, we are oddly comfortable. Exchanging a lifetime for Lu Shaoting's happiness? I'm not noble enough for that. I just feel that although Lu Xun is rigid in bed, being with him is still relatively comfortable. I don't want to probe or dwell on the things he did to keep me. Too twisted, it would only hurt me. In life, I've learned, live openly, take things lightly. Because if I can't let go, growing up in that family, I would have died depressed long ago. If you can't struggle, accept. It makes life so much easier. No matter the hardships, no matter who is beside me, I must remember, I am always myself. Liu will be happy. 14 extra. In springtime, the city's banquets never ceased. If you were to ask who was the most popular person in the capital now, it had to be Li, the proprietor of Baiwei bookstore. And talking about this Li, one could go on for 3 days and nights without running out of things to say. Some said she was the personal guest of the widowed Princess Rongyang. Others said she was a noble scion from a Jiangnan family. In short, mysterious. Untouchable. If you ask me, that Li Wuyu is just a pretty boy living off male charm. Look at him, complained the newly minted scholar Wang Wuwei. The princess's mansion was blooming with flowers, lively and bustling. She was now only 30, but loved inviting young talents from across the capital for fun and games. Everyone else was neglected, except Li Wuyu, who was invited to the pavilions and lakeside terraces. From afar, no one knew what she was saying, but it made the noble ladies burst into laughter. The laughter carried, and some voices turned sour. Lu Xun sat upright, drinking his tea silently. His vision was excellent. He noticed someone slip something into his wife's tea and quietly sighed. Had this been many years ago, and someone told him he would marry such a husband-hunting wife, he would have surely thrown that person out. Now he had accepted his fate. Second young master. Say something. If this Li Wuyu keeps running around the capital, we simply can't stand it. Right. It's just a bookstore. More and more people added their sour remarks.
Just then Li Wuyu arrived.
She lifted the curtain and stepped in, and for a moment, the whole room seemed to light up. Li Wuyu wore a lake green outfit. Her face was bright and handsome. When she smiled, her eyes were full of warmth. She walked over to Lu Xun and casually drank his tea. Seeing no one spoke, she laughed. Brother Wang, were you just talking about a bookstore? Were you talking about mine? Wang Wuwei met her gaze, blushed and stammered. I was saying your bookstore is very well run, Li. Li Wuyu had a servant hand him a book and said gently, I remember you love the legend of the Condor heroes, Brother Wang. Here's a collector's edition for you. Lu Xun watched as Wang, flustered, accepted it awkwardly. A crowd quickly gathered. Their lady stood in the middle, speaking effortlessly, radiant. Lu Xun, the proper husband, was completely ignored. Li Wuyu hadn't had time to speak to him when someone called her away. Silently, Lu Xun followed. In the backyard, trouble was evident. Princess.
Stop. Don't.
She struggled, pressed among the flowers. Li Lang. Just this once, okay? Lu Xun pressed his temple and called for someone to take the famous Princess Rongyang away. He approached to see his wife flushed and lying amid the crushed hibiscus blooms. The flowers were beautiful, but she was more beautiful. Seeing Lu Xun, she relaxed. He wrapped her in his cloak. Her body was warm, clinging to him in grievance. Through the side gate, a carriage waited. The servants of the Dingyuan Marquis saw their young master hurrying back, holding someone in his arms, coaxing along the way. Good girl, let's go to the bedroom first. All right, gently. Back in the bedroom, Lu Xun's neck already bore a few bite marks. The one who had been struck couldn't endure it any longer. Normally, Lu Xun would have yielded to her immediately. But today, he insisted she learn a lesson. Lu Xun kissed her cheek slowly, teasing. Who am I? Lu Xun. Her eyes hazy. She began to cry, tearing at his clothes. He held her hands and asked again. Who is Lu Xun? She refused to speak, sulking under the covers. Lu Xun smiled, noticing her feet peeking out, shaking with frustration. He bent down, tenderly kissing her ankles, moving upward. They both went under the covers. After a while, soft gasps came from Wuyu. She seemed stifled, her face flushed from spring rains. Wuyu, almost unable to bear it, nudged the person beside her under the covers. Lu Xun emerged, still smiling. She glanced at him, still uncomfortable, covering her eyes with her hand, unwilling to look. He thought, once she found me rigid now, she's even more shy. He didn't rush, spring was beautiful, the days long. After washing his hands and face and rinsing his mouth, he lowered the canopy and got into bed. From within came Li Wuyu's voice again. Go away. Annoying. Don't. Lu Xun stroked her hair, utterly at peace. Li Wuyu lay against his chest, muttering, Next time I'll be more careful, protect myself better. Sorry for worrying you. He pinched her cheeks, then flipped her over, kissing her deeply and fully. When she woke, the room was already lit. She was tired but completely refreshed. Lu Xun had helped her wash. He noticed immediately that she had woken. Parting the curtain, he bent to kiss her cheek and asked, Hungry? Chicken soup noodles, mini wontons, bird's nest porridge. What would you like? Li Wuyu, eyes closed, resting on his leg, first shook her head. Then softly said, Lu Xun, actually, I've liked you for a very long time, long before you knew. He thought, I know, how could I not know? In that little courtyard, on a day just like this, she said she wanted to learn to read. Every day, leaving early and returning late, searching for doctors, flipping through medical books, all to cure his eyes. She burned the kitchen several times trying to make longevity noodles for him. Back then, Lu Xun couldn't see, sitting in the courtyard, listening to the chaotic sounds of the yard.
She sang.
She washed clothes. She played with the children. But whatever she did, she always spoke to him. Master, have some plums. Master, I saw a flute in your room. Can you accompany me? Master, we're playing a game with a jump rope. Hold the rope for us. Later, once he fell asleep in a recliner, he noticed someone gently stroking his brow. That person whispered softly, Lu Xun, I hope you're not so lonely. Lu Xun thought, so this is what it feels like to be cared for. He later did many foolish things. Even though he had mastered carving knives, he would deliberately cut his hand. Even though he knew the courtyard layout perfectly, he would deliberately trip. Even though he noticed the pattern on his teacup was different, he deliberately used it wrong. Master, don't move. Master, it's not broken, right? Master, the one you're using, it's fine. Later still, he heard his wife murmur, They say if you care for a man, you will fall for him. Back then, you couldn't care for yourself, and it made me so worried about you. Lu Xun thought silently, Wife, I loved you first. That's why I made so many chances for you to worry about me. His heart was full of tenderness. His wife had already dressed, hugging him. Tonight, I won't stay home. I need to visit Qiaonyang and Xiaohua. No dinner for me. Qiaonyang promised to make butter cakes tonight. Don't read in bed yourself, be good. She kissed his cheek and, in male attire, hummed a tune as she left. When they married, they set 3 rules. In male clothing, she was Li Wuyu, to play the husband for Qiaonyang, a father for Xiaohua, holding up their little home. In female clothing, she was Li Yu, living life with Lu Xun at the Marquis. The door closed, leaving the room silent. Lu Xun sat for a while, then went out. He called a chef and coolly asked, Can you make butter cakes? The chef immediately said, Yes, your lordship, I can. Lu Xun spoke succinctly, Teach me. The chef was stunned. But the attending servant thought, Our young master has learned chicken soup noodles, sweet and sour ribs, osmanthus cakes, and now butter cakes. Who knows what he'll learn next? The end. Wow, if you thought you'd seen drama, this story takes it to a whole new level. Watching our heroine juggle chaos, trickery, and yes, selling her blind noble husband is both hilarious and wild. Honestly, it's impossible not to laugh and gasp at the same time. Absolute chaos, Pure fun, and somehow oddly satisfying.